he wouldn't tote no more than he felt he could comfortably carry. Overload him, and he just wouldn't move. Stand there and look at you with them eyes telling you to get that crap off his back. Smart. The rider looked all around him careful, then stood still and sniffed the air. He could detect nothing in the cool mountain air except the scent of nature's own growth in springtime. There was no engine smell. After so many years in the mountains, he had learned that all men have a distinctive scent that can be picked up by others if you just teach your blower to do it. He stretched out on his belly by the creek and took him a long drink of cold, clean water. He thought about taking off his moccasins and sticking his bare feet in the creek and splashing around some, like a kid. But some poor critter downstream that wasn't hurting nobody, and who'd just come out of the woods for a cool drink, would be sick for a week. He did take off his moccasins and rub his feet, though. Felt good. He rubbed his feet dry on the grass and slipped back into his moccasins. He chewed on a piece of jerky and wished long for some coffee. But he'd been out of coffee for weeks. That was another reason for this trip. He had to resupply with salt and beans and coffee and the like. He also had to get him a new pair of long-handle underwear. His was plumb wore out, and his buckskins were thin. He was known from the Northwest to the deserts of the Southwest as Preacher. He was far from being a man of the cloth, about as far as a man could get, even though he'd been raised in the church as a boy. When he was new and green to the high lonesome, Injuns had grabbed him and was planning on slow roasting him to see how well he stood pain. If he stood it well, they would praise him and sing songs about him. Of course, those songs would be sort of hard to appreciate from the grave. So he started preaching. He preached all day and all night. The Injuns finally figured he was crazy as a lizard and turned him loose. The nickname stuck. Preacher had been in the mountains since he was just a boy. He had run away from a good home and reached the mountains a year later. And while he had left the mountains many times to see what was over the next ridge or river, he always returned to the high lonesome. He had lived with a number of tribes and gotten along with many of them. He'd had him a squaw from time to time and a few offspring. But unlike many of his counterparts, Preacher could see the writing on the wall, so to speak, even though he might have some difficulty reading actual words. The beaver market was glutted. Man was hard-pressed to make a living anymore, and it was only going to get worse. He knew that, while most of the other mountain men did not or would not accept it. Preacher could do a lot of things besides trapping. He could pan for gold. He could scout for the army or for wagon trains. He even knew a little about farming, although he kept that to himself. He cut his eyes to hammer as the horse raised his head and pricked his ears up. He was over to him in a heartbeat, stroking his neck and talking to him low, so he wouldn't whinny and give away their position. He spoke to the pack horse and rubbed his neck. They stood quiet, but they weren't liking what they smelled one damn bit. Then Preacher smelled what the horses had smelled, and he heard them coming. Injuns, and their scent was strong. With it came the scent of blood, fresh blood. He picketed both horses on graze and pulled the pistols from the saddle horn. He slipped to the top of a rise and peeked through the brush. What he saw below didn't sit well at all. 5 young bucks, and they had prisoners. The Injuns looked to be Arapaho, and Preacher never had got on too well with that tribe. They just didn't much like the white man. Preacher lay still, moving only his eyes, carefully checking everything out. But it appeared 5 was all there was. But 5 bucks on the warpath was plenty. He could see fresh scalps on the manes of their horses and on their war lances, and they weren't Injun scalps.